I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there.
The feeling that we got when they came out with the baby, we couldn't miss it again. We couldn't miss this one.
Queen Camilla.
Queen Camilla.
When Queen Camilla laughed at Princess Charlotte's dress, the moment sparked a reaction that left everyone stunned. Princess Charlotte stood in front of the tall mirror in her Adelaide cottage bedroom early in the morning at Windsor. She had been invited to a small afternoon tea at Clarence's house. It was not an official royal engagement, but her grandmother, Queen Camilla, would be there along with a few family friends and some guests from Camilla's charitable work. Charlotte was holding up a dress her mother had helped her pick out. It was soft blue cotton, sprinkled with white flowers, and had a small bow at the waist. Catherine thought it was perfect for the occasion, simple, but lovely. Charlotte, who had been learning to make small choices about her wardrobe, liked the way the skirt moved when she turned. "Remember, Lottie," Catherine said, leaning against the doorframe, "this is not like a school play date. There will be photographers outside, so keep your shoulders back." Charlotte smiled and nodded. At just 10 years old, she already knew how to walk into a room without looking shy. People had called her the boss of her siblings, and she didn't mind. She liked making decisions. By early afternoon, the family's car pulled up to Clarence's house. The grand building, with its cream-colored walls and deep green shutters, seemed even larger than Charlotte remembered. She stepped out, holding onto her mother's hand, her dress fluttering slightly in the warm breeze. Queen Camilla was standing just inside the entrance hall. She wore a cream linen dress with a string of pearls and had her reading glasses resting on the top of her head. As soon as she saw Charlotte, her lips curved into a smile, but then she let out a small laugh. "Oh my, Charlotte," Camilla said, still smiling. "You look like a little spring garden walking in." Charlotte froze for half a second. The tone was light, but the laughter made her unsure. Was it a compliment or a gentle tease? She wasn't used to people laughing at her clothes. She remembered how much care she and her mum had put into choosing it. Camilla noticed the hint of uncertainty and reached for Charlotte's hands. "It's lovely, darling. Very fresh. I just thought you might start handing out roses to everyone," she added with a chuckle. Charlotte gave a polite smile, remembering her mother's advice about always being gracious, but inside she felt a tiny pinch of embarrassment. She glanced at her mum, who smiled softly but didn't say anything. This was royal life. Sometimes you weren't sure what people really meant. The guests soon gathered in the drawing room, a space filled with soft armchairs, tall windows, and a few tables lined with delicate sandwiches and scones. Camilla was moving easily from group to group, speaking with her usual warm tone. She had a way of making each person feel like the most important person in the room. Charlotte watched her from the corner, noticing how confidently she carried herself. After a while, Camilla motioned Charlotte over. "Come, my dear. I want you to meet Mrs. Woodhouse from the National Literacy Trust. She adores young readers." Charlotte stepped forward, holding her teacup carefully. She had been reading more lately, encouraged by her mum, and knew Camilla loved books too. The Queen Consort often spoke about her reading initiatives and had even started her own online book club. Mrs. Woodhouse leaned down. "I hear you're quite the reader yourself, Princess Charlotte. Do you have a favorite?" Charlotte answered politely, talking about a story she'd just finished at school. Camilla listened with a faint smile but occasionally glanced at Charlotte's dress again as if she was still amused by it. That subtle attention kept Charlotte aware of herself. The conversation drifted, and Charlotte stepped back to let others speak. She found a spot near the window and took in the view of the garden outside. Children were playing on the lawn. They were guests' kids, laughing and running between the rose bushes. Charlotte longed to join them, but she knew she couldn't until the formal tea was over. When the gathering began to wind down, Camilla approached her again. This time she was holding a small plate with a slice of sponge cake. "For you," she said. "You've been very patient today." Charlotte took it and thanked her. Camilla studied her for a moment. "You know, when I was your age, I hated sitting still at events like this. I wanted to be outside with the horses. I know you love to ride." "Yes," Charlotte said, brightening a little. "I like riding, and I like tennis too." "Good," Camilla replied. "Always make time for the things you love, even if your dress is too pretty to run in," she added with a grin. The words were said lightly, but Charlotte felt another twist in her stomach. She wondered if Camilla thought her dress was silly. It had seemed perfect at home, but now she wasn't sure. When it was finally time to leave, Charlotte walked out beside her mother. As they stepped into the car, Catherine leaned down. "You did well, Lottie. You were polite and you handled yourself beautifully." Charlotte nodded, though she didn't say much. She kept replaying Camilla's laughter in her head. It wasn't unkind, but it had left a mark. And as they drove away from Clarence House, Charlotte found herself wondering if she'd ever feel the same about that blue dress again. She didn't know yet that this small moment was about to grow into something bigger. The next morning at the breakfast room in Adelaide Cottage, Prince George was flipping through a football magazine, while Prince Louis was focused on a bowl of cereal. Charlotte sat between them, unusually quiet, staring at her plate. Catherine noticed immediately. "Still thinking about yesterday?" she asked softly. Charlotte hesitated, then nodded. "Granny Camilla laughed at my dress. She didn't mean it badly," Catherine replied. "She was teasing in her own way. But I know it can feel strange when someone comments like that." Before Charlotte could answer, George looked up. "Well, if the Queen says something, people will notice. You know how things end up online." George's words proved to be true sooner than anyone expected. By midday, Catherine's phone buzzed with a message from her private secretary. A royal blogger had posted a short clip from the tea gathering. In the background, Camilla's laugh could be heard as she greeted Charlotte. The post caption read, "Queen Camilla chuckles at Princess Charlotte's floral dress. Harmless fun or a bit much?" Within hours, it was spreading across social media. Headlines popped up on entertainment websites, twisting the moment into something bigger. "Royal awkwardness at Clarence House," read one. Another claimed, "Camilla's comment leaves young princess embarrassed." Charlotte overheard her parents discussing it in the kitchen. William sounded calm but firm. "It's nothing serious, but the more it circulates, the more people will start adding their own version of events. We don't want her upset." Catherine glanced toward the hallway, aware Charlotte might be listening. She's only 10. She doesn't need to carry that weight. But Charlotte already knew. She had seen her classmates react when things trended online. And she wasn't looking forward to any teasing at school. She remembered how Camilla's eyes had landed on her dress more than once, and how the little jokes had kept coming. Now it was out there for everyone to judge. That afternoon, Charlotte retreated to her room. She opened the wardrobe and stared at the blue dress, still hanging neatly. It no longer looked as nice to her. She thought of Camilla's words and felt a mix of confusion and hurt. A knock came at the door. It was William. He stepped inside and sat on the edge of her bed. "I hear you're having a rough day." Charlotte shrugged. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You didn't," William agreed. "Sometimes people make comments they think are light-hearted, but they land differently. That happens even in families." He paused, then smiled slightly. "Camilla has her own way of speaking. She doesn't always realize how it might sound. I know she cares about you. But if something bothers you, you can always tell us." Charlotte nodded, feeling a little better. She wasn't angry, but she didn't want to be laughed at in public. Meanwhile, over at Clarence House, Camilla was reading through her daily briefing. Her aide, Sarah, hesitated before mentioning the growing online chatter. "There's a bit of talk about yesterday, ma'am, the dress comment. Some blogs are calling it awkward." Camilla frowned. "It was a harmless remark. I meant she looked sweet." "Yes, but the clip makes it look different," Sarah replied. Camilla sighed. She had faced media storms before. Years ago, the public had been much harsher toward her. This was small in comparison, but she disliked the idea of Charlotte feeling uncomfortable. "Perhaps I should call Catherine," she said finally. Later that evening the call came. Catherine answered, her tone polite but firm. "Charlotte's fine, but she's aware of the attention." "I meant it as a compliment," Camilla said. "She looked lovely. I never wanted her to feel embarrassed." "I know," Catherine replied, "but you understand how these things snowball." Camilla did understand. She had spent decades being picked apart in the press. Still, she hadn't expected something as small as a floral dress to become a talking point. The next day, Charlotte returned to school. As she walked through the gates, a few classmates whispered. One girl giggled and said, "Nice garden dress," before darting off. Charlotte forced a smile, but kept walking. In class, she tried to focus, but her mind kept drifting. She imagined everyone had seen the clip. She wondered if Camilla realized how much weight her words carried, especially in front of others. Back at Windsor that afternoon, Catherine found Charlotte sketching in her notebook. "What are you drawing?" she asked. Charlotte turned the page to show a picture of a girl in a different dress, plain, with no flowers. "Maybe next time I'll wear something nobody can laugh at," she said quietly. Catherine sat beside her. "Or maybe next time, you wear whatever makes you happy. And if anyone laughs, you remember that it says more about them than about you." Charlotte looked at her mum, unsure whether to believe it yet. She knew the story wasn't over. There would be another family event soon, and she couldn't avoid Camilla forever. Somewhere in her mind, a small question was forming. What would happen the next time they met, now that the whole world seemed to have an opinion on her dress? 2 weeks later, the family calendar had another event marked in bold. It was a charity garden party at Buckingham Palace, hosted by King Charles and Queen Camilla, with several senior royals attending. The event was in support of literacy and children's education, two causes close to Camilla's heart. Charlotte was told she would be helping hand out small bookmarks to children from local schools who had been invited. It was meant to be light and cheerful. William and Catherine thought it would be good for her to see the positive side of public events again. The morning of the party, Catherine knocked on Charlotte's door. "Come and see this," she said, holding up a soft lilac dress with a subtle lace collar. "Simple, pretty, and you can run in it if you need to." Charlotte hesitated. "I don't want anyone laughing this time." "They won't," Catherine reassured her, "and if they do, you'll know how to handle it." By the time they arrived at the palace, the lawns were already buzzing with guests. Tables were set with cakes, fruit tarts, and plates of sandwiches. A small stage had been set up for short speeches. The royal family moved through the crowd, shaking hands and greeting guests. Charlotte spotted Camilla across the lawn, speaking animatedly to a group of authors and teachers. The Queen Consort looked elegant in a pastel green coat dress and matching hat. Charlotte took a deep breath and reminded herself she was there to do a job, handing out bookmarks and chatting with the children. When Camilla noticed Charlotte, she walked over with a bright smile. "Ah, here's our young helper. You look very nice today." The comment was brief and warm, without laughter. Charlotte relaxed a little. They began their round together, meeting groups of children. Camilla introduced Charlotte to each one, often adding, "She's quite the reader herself." Charlotte answered questions, handed out bookmarks, and even posed for a few photos. Things were going smoothly until they reached a small table where a photographer from a popular tabloid stood waiting. As Camilla and Charlotte stopped for a picture, the photographer joked, No flowers today, Princess?" Camilla laughed lightly at the remark. "No, no flowers. We've gone for lace instead, haven't we, Charlotte?" The words were harmless, but the sound of her laughter again, this time in front of cameras, made Charlotte's stomach tighten. She managed a polite smile for the photo, but her mind was already racing. Within an hour, the first images were online. One headline read, "Camilla jokes again about Charlotte's outfit at public event." Though the tone was less sharp than last time, the comparisons to the Clarence House tea began immediately. William noticed it on his phone during a quiet moment. He walked over to where Charlotte was offering a bookmark to a young boy. "You're doing brilliantly," he told her. "Ignore the noise." But ignoring it was easier said than done. A few minutes later, Charlotte overheard two women near the refreshment table whispering about the dress incident. She wanted to disappear behind the nearest hedge. Camilla, meanwhile, seemed unaware of the whispers. She moved between groups, talking about the Queen's Reading Room project and encouraging children to explore libraries. She was in her element, speaking passionately about books and reading habits. Eventually, Camilla and Charlotte found themselves side by side again. "You've done very well today," Camilla said, placing a hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "I think the children liked you." Charlotte nodded, but didn't meet her eyes. Camilla noticed and tilted her head. "Still worried about what people say?" "A little," Charlotte admitted quietly. Camilla's expression softened. "People have been saying things about me for decades, sometimes kind, sometimes not. You can't let it stop you from showing up." Charlotte looked at her, unsure if this was advice or just something adults said to make you feel better. She thought about the first time she'd heard Camilla laugh at her dress and how quickly the world had turned it into a story. As the afternoon drew on, a light drizzle began to fall. Guests hurried under white tents, and the pace of the event slowed. Charlotte stood near the edge of the lawn, watching as Camilla chatted with the last few visitors. She noticed how at ease Camilla seemed, even with the cameras still clicking. But then, as they prepared to leave, a reporter called out, "Princess Charlotte, will you be bringing back the flower dress for the summer?" It was meant to be cheeky, but the question cut through the drizzle like a cold wind. Charlotte froze for a moment. Before she could answer, Camilla stepped forward. "She has plenty of lovely dresses," she said with a firm smile, moving Charlotte gently toward the palace steps. The reporter's voice was lost in the shuffle as the royals disappeared inside. Charlotte stayed quiet as they walked down a corridor lined with portraits of past monarchs. In the car on the way back to Windsor, she stared out of the window. She wondered if something as small as a dress could keep coming up again and again. What would happen if she wore something bold at the next event? Would it be another round of whispers, or would she finally take control of the moment? When they reached Adelaide Cottage, George and Louis ran upstairs, leaving mother and daughter alone in the kitchen. Catherine set two mugs on the table and slid one toward Charlotte. "You did well today," she said gently. "You stayed calm, even when someone tried to be cheeky." Charlotte traced her finger along the table's edge. "But it's still about the dress. Every time." "I know," Catherine replied, sitting opposite her. "Sometimes a story sticks longer than it should. The best way to move past it is to show people it doesn't bother you anymore." That evening, Charlotte stayed in her room, flipping through a book without really reading. She thought about the way people looked at her when the subject came up. It made her feel small, as though she were part of a joke she didn't understand. The next morning, as she sat by the window reading, a small envelope arrived addressed in neat handwriting. Inside was a short note that read, "My dear Charlotte, I've been thinking about our last two events. I'm sorry if my words made you feel uncomfortable. I truly thought you looked beautiful. Let's have tea together soon. We can talk about books and perhaps even plan our own reading event. With love, Granny Camilla." Charlotte read it twice. It wasn't like Camilla to send personal notes, and the thought of a quiet tea without cameras felt unusual. She wasn't sure if it was an apology or just a gesture, but she decided to accept. A week later, she was led into one of Clarence House's smaller sitting rooms. The room was warm and inviting, with a pot of tea steaming on a low table beside a plate of biscuits. Camilla stood to greet her, smiling warmly. "I thought we might start our own little book swap," she said, pointing to a small stack of novels. Charlotte smiled back. She had brought along a worn copy of her latest school story, its corners bent from reading. In return, Camilla handed her a beautifully illustrated book about a girl and her horse. "I read this when I was about your age," she explained. "It made me want to spend more time outside." They poured tea and nibbled biscuits while talking about favorite characters and authors. Camilla asked questions, listened carefully, and even jotted down the name of another book Charlotte mentioned. At one point, Camilla leaned back and said, "You're growing into a very confident young lady. Don't let little things or little comments take that away from you." Charlotte felt lighter as she left Clarence House that afternoon. She still remembered the uncomfortable moments in front of the cameras, but now there was something else to hold on to. The quiet tea, the book swap, and the feeling that maybe her relationship with Camilla could be different. The blue floral dress remained in her wardrobe untouched for weeks. Each time she saw it, the memory of that first awkward question returned. But so did the memory of Camilla's note and their conversation. Gradually, the dress became less of a symbol of embarrassment and more a reminder that things could change. During this time, Charlotte noticed other things too. The way her mother handled awkward moments in public without letting them linger. The way her father deflected questions with humor. It was as though the dress incident had opened her eyes to the skills that kept the family steady in the public eye. A month later, when another public engagement came up, Charlotte surprised everyone by choosing that same blue dress. Catherine noticed but said nothing, only giving her a small nod of approval. George raised an eyebrow but quickly smiled, and Louis just asked if he could wear his favorite jumper again. When they arrived, cameras flashed and voices called her name. Camilla, standing nearby, caught sight of Charlotte and smiled warmly. "Now that's my favorite dress," she said, her voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. This time, there was no laughter, no awkward follow-up. Instead, the group of school children waiting to greet her clapped and waved. Charlotte walked straight toward them, her shoulders back and her smile bright, feeling entirely in control. Later, as they headed home, Catherine asked softly, "So, how did it feel?" Charlotte thought for a moment before answering. "Like it's just a dress again," she said. That evening, she hung the dress carefully back in her wardrobe. The dress was the same, but she had changed. Some lessons, she realized, didn't come from books or classrooms. They came through moments you didn't expect. A conversation over tea, a kind word in public, and the decision to face something head-on. Charlotte went to bed that night, feeling older somehow, though she couldn't say exactly why. She had learned that you couldn't control what people said or remembered, but you could choose how you carried it. And that choice made all the difference. What do you think about the way Charlotte handled herself? Do you believe this will change how she's seen at future royal events? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.